My name is Arellano. I'm a businessman from Dixon. I own a Jimmy John's franchise and a very small real estate company that essentially holds the land for my Jimmy John's, so it's a barely worthwhile company. But ironically, under IRS, it actually makes more money than my Jimmy John's. I won't explain how that works, but I did run for state representative. I've been politically active for a little while. I helped on Randy Hallgren's campaign purely as a local volunteer, nothing fancy. When he was running for congressman against the Democrat Milwaukee, who is now, I believe, in Congress again, somewhere else. I'm also an Army sergeant. I'm in the Rockford Reserves, an engineer company up there. And I'm still in that. I'm probably going career at this point because I've been in there a decade. I just got one more decade to finish that. So I still do that. I'm a Republican precinct committeeman, so I stay active in my local party as well as my local Tea Party, which is the Sauk Valley Tea Party. And I have stayed active since I ran the Republican primary. It was a four-way primary. I lost by 2%. So it was a very close race in a very Republican district. Came in second. It was very much a learning experience, of course. Anytime you do anything for the first time, especially something that takes as much organization as running for office. So it was a learning experience, but I have stayed active since then. And that's what I came out here to talk with you about, some of the things I've done since then that I think might be interesting to you out here in DeKalb County and surrounding counties. And after I got out, of course, I took a break, took a while off, reintroduced myself to my wife, things of that nature. But I did stay active, and one of the things that ended up popping up on the November ballot, other than the regular races, is something that I found very interesting. And it was a sales tax referendum for my county, Lee County. And I did a little bit of research. You know, my knee-jerk reaction as a small government conservative is to say, no, I don't want any more taxes. You know, I'm a supporter of the Tea Party. Of course, tax number ready, so it kind of comes right with the territory. But I'm also the kind of person who researches my issues pretty thoroughly. And I do like the idea of taking certain powers away from the state level to the federal level and bringing it more local. So I'm not necessarily automatically opposed to saying we're going to have more local control of our school districts, our school board, and the local spending. Because I know I can go into my school board, introduce myself to some of them, tell them my opinion on issues, and they're going to listen. It doesn't necessarily always work at the county level, or certainly not the state level. In the federal government, they don't care about me, or you really, unless you control a lot of votes. So I like the idea of bringing government control more local, as close to the individual as possible. So I decided I was going to give this a really hard look. And I researched the issues a little bit. I came to find out that these had been popping up all over the state. So I looked up why. In 2007, and Representative Pritchard actually might know a little bit more about the history than I do about this, but in 2007, Illinois passed the County School Facility Tax Act, which said that once a school board or school boards equal to 51% of the population in a county approve it, a tax referendum, I believe up to max 1%, or it might just be 1%. I don't want to put that up for sure. It goes on the ballot for any countywide ballot coming up. So in this case, they used the November elections, which is the big turnout elections. And I think they regretted it at the end, and I'll explain why. But essentially what happens is going to ballot, it can only be used for facilities. So you can't go use to pay teachers, any kind of projects, only facilities. And the way they sell this to you, of course, is that, again, the local control, which is something that attracts me, but also the idea that this allows them to expand, allows them to do things without the state money that they're getting. And this is where I started running into problems. Because what ends up happening, and one of the big sells for this, is that it will lower your property taxes, which is also a very good idea. And instead, it will draw sales tax, which is a consumption tax, and you kind of have more control over it than your property. Because unless you move, you're paying property tax. So this is also an interesting idea. So I studied it a little bit more, and my problem with it is what ends up happening is not that property tax doesn't necessarily cut, and not that the state spends less. What you end up doing, I feel, is bailing out the state's misappropriation of funds and poor spending of money. So projects that they would have been earmarking for education, they're now cutting because our pension crisis is so big, our debt interest is so big, all these other issues are so big. They don't necessarily go and cut spending. You get the exact same response they had when they increased the sales tax, the income tax during the lame duck session. Did spending go down in that period? Did they use that new money to pay down debts, to address pensions? Not really. Not really. They found new things to spend on. We got immediately began distrusting the sales tax idea. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this is going to be a long-term, permanent cost of living increase that we're essentially taking upon ourselves to bail out state level government, and yes, even the federal government a little bit. And in Dixon especially, where, if you've been paying attention, we have $53 million embezzled from us, but not even an elected official, just somebody who's gotten in a little farce up there for a while. I kind of almost saw it as the mythical corruption taxes that you pay in Chicago, where so much is getting filtered away that they raise taxes so they have money to actually operate stuff and pay for all the people stealing money and misappropriating. And that's kind of the opinion I started forming about this sales tax. So I'll give you a couple real quick numbers and then my experiences with it. First of all, it's been on the ballot 42 times in different counties since that 2007 Act. It failed 31 times and passed in 11 counties. Although some of those failures, in fact most of them I believe, that end up turning into passes because they keep putting it on the ballot. Which is one of the reasons why I wanted to come out and talk to you today. They just put it on the ballot again in Lee County. They put it on again in Whiteside County, and they're trying to put it on in Ogle County. So it failed in the November elections. It actually failed roughly 59. It failed like basically 60 to 40. It was like almost a 20% difference. They're immediately putting it back on the April elections. Why? Because they found that they hit this huge turnout in the November elections, and a lot of the people they thought were going to be voting for it, poor people, people kind of living day to day that might like this new spending on this project, they made this glowing recommendation of all things they were going to spend the money on, actually voted against it because they don't want to pay more taxes because they got day-to-day bills to pay. And what they found is some of the more wealthy people in town ended up supporting it because what do they care, about a few dollars here and a few dollars there. It's not much money. So they put it back on the April elections, and to their credit, making a good fact argument, they basically said, look, we have a better chance of passing this in April because less people are paying attention, and you can mobilize turnout better. And they also have said, and they've said this publicly, this is something they'll tell you, it generally takes 2 to 3 times getting this on the ballot to pass it. In most of the counties that it's passed, that's what they do. They put it on the ballot, until they get close enough where they, the right turnout mix can push it over. Now, I want to go back to the fact that I don't necessarily have a problem with the idea of localizing how we spend our money, especially for schools. In fact, I very much like the idea. But my problems with this particular tax, and specifically the way they're doing it, is that they're going to sell you, and this is what they tried in Lee County, they're going to sell you on short-term benefits and not remind you that this tax is going to go on to infinity. So while you might have some control over the first project they pick, after that it's going to go back to people that you don't necessarily pay for. So I'm going to ask you a quick question here, and I'm going to make you raise your hand, so I apologize for that. This is class participation. How many of you guys have ever been to a school board meeting? Raise your hands if you've ever been to a school board meeting. So roughly half the crowd, and what I'm assuming is a very activist group of people. So that's when people get up to Saturday afternoon to come here, come talk about politics right after an election. And for the general public, it's much smaller. So one of my big issues is that these taxes are then going to go on and get spent. They're not really going to cut property taxes from what I've seen in any of the counties I looked at. And I did look. I'm not something I spouted. I went, researched some of the counties that have passed it. Doesn't really cut property taxes. And I think that here I'm delving purely into opinion. We are bailing out the state government at some level for not being able to budget properly. We are bailing them out for an inability to handle their budget, for forcing in spending and education cuts that they have, essentially taken over. Now, like, we're going to try to sneak this on to the local taxpayers, get them to raise their own tax on themselves. We can wash our hands of it. We don't get hit with the negativity of raising their taxes. And I think it's a net loss. And I see it as part of, and again, I'm firmly in the realm of opinion now, I see it as part of a trend where the state government sees to localize some of the problems that have come about because of their inability to budget properly. And right now I'm specifically talking about an idea that has, again, I feel some merit, which is to force more of the responsibility of pension payments onto the local governments. Now the plus side of this, and I see it as part of the same theme, is very similar to the sales tax program, which is that local governments be held more responsible for the decisions they make. necessarily have to absorb that, the state does. And as we know, the state has a huge problem with their pension payments. So there's a lot of things I like in the idea, and I haven't read any of the bills introduced word for word, so I'm not going to opine too long on them. But one of the other issues I have with that is at the state level, they set a lot of the parameters within which those local governments can negotiate, especially things that affect pensions. So they control the parameters, and now they're going to push some of the costs on the local government, an idea that has merit, make them more accountable, but they're also making them a scapegoat for some of their own unwillingness to adjust some of the critical fundamental problems with how pensions are paid out. And I see this as a broader trend. So why am I here today? I'm here today, A, to tell you to keep your eyes open for this trend. We're in a state government that repeatedly has bosses out of Chicago that want to spread costs out to local areas and rural areas to bail them out of their inability to properly budget and run state government, both with local sales taxes, with this pension fix, and with any other ideas that come out. It's also part of the plan to broaden the tax base. Another idea I'm not knee-jerk against. But you see them now taxing things like braiding hair in Chicago, if I remember right. They raise taxes on pot, sales taxes. Little things that aren't going to catch your eye as fast as the big income tax hike will. Some of these can slip right by you because the local school boards are doing them. Ways that, in my opinion, grow government without actually having any of the added responsibility to run that process. So, as I said, the end result in Lee County was at law 60-40. In LaSalle County, it was much closer. It was like 51-49. It's going to go back on the ballot in LaSalle County, I believe. It's going to be back on the ballot in Lee County. It's going to be on in Ogle County. Probably Whiteside County will be on again for the third or fourth time. So, as you look at some of these big issues, obviously gun rights has been a huge discussion, both state and nationally lately. The income tax hike, obviously a huge discussion. The national level issues that capture your mind, don't forget. And this is what I want to impress upon you. In my rambling, you forget all the other things I said. This is what I want to impress upon you. Is never forget that some of the decisions